Hi, I'm Andy Hickle, and my colleague Kevin Eustace is hiding back there. We launched our product Saga last night, so if I'm slightly incoherent, that's why. I also have a 2-year-old. Our parent company's name is ARO, but I'm not here to talk about the product. I'm not here to talk about the company. I'm really here to talk about the future of memory. So we as humans have this kind of innate, insatiable desire to record and to share memories. We can't help it. You give us a new technology and we figure out ways to be able to augment ourselves, to take pictures, to take audio recordings, and to be able to put that out into the public in some way. What were the first cave paintings except a way to commemorate an epic barbecue, right? And writing systems caught on immediately, regardless of how arcane or how crazy they were, because they allowed us to be more than ourselves, to augment our memory, to be persistent in a way that we can't be persistent by ourselves. Our memories are these connections of neurons, these collections of neurotransmitters that go by, and they're eminently ephemeral. And the idea is that, how do we necessarily give some sort of persistence or some sort of permanence to our life? And this has been a driving force in technology innovation, right? We've gone from writing systems and wax tablets to multimedia systems and movie cameras and web apps, right? Instagram is a way to be able to make the ephemeral permanent or semi-permanent. And there's startups like Video that do it from not just still photos, but crazy kind of videos of bikini-clad women and surfers. There's other web apps that are out there to help let me track my mood over time, right? So Track Your Happiness is a great source that pings you and says, dude, how are you feeling right now? And Bedpost, I know there's got to be a Bedpost user in here, right? Bedpost is a social network that tracks how often you got busy, right? And you can ask your partners and your positions and time and duration. I don't think it's around anymore, but it's always good for a laugh. The question, though, is why? Why are we wired to do this? Well, there's personal motivation, right? I talked about persistence and permanence, and offloading memories and being bigger than yourself. And there's the value of nostalgia, right? To be able to go back and tell your story and say, yeah, that visit to Disneyland I had when I was 13 was really epic, even though it kind of sucked at the time. But what I think is more fascinating is this notion of social. Why, given an ability to make something permanent, do I feel compelled to share it? And we can think of 100 adult use cases if you want to. Why do people who, given the fact that they can take a camera and they can share it intimately with one other person, why are they taking pictures of themselves naked? Why are we recording more and more of these kind of, taking these intimate moments and making them semi-public or public? And this is a question that I'm not going to address as much today, but this is the one that, as a salesman and a scientist, keeps me going. I'm going to talk about why, it's time to focus on social, and that's precisely because we've solved how to capture all of that information, all of that data that necessarily is involved in kind of having that personal data make real. So, hi, I'm Andy, and I'm a Lifelogger. The one big piece of coverage that we got after our app launch, our soft launch last night, was in the Stranger Today that said that they said lifelogging is stupid. And I said, okay, well, no, it's not stupid. It's something that's valuable. It's something that allows me to go back and introspect, allows me to go back and figure out why I'm better now than I was last Tuesday. And I need to preach to the choir here. This is not a new concept. Ben Franklin did it for 60 years. Buckminster Fuller did it for 40 years. Nick Felton has made a career of building beautiful visualizations from, kind of mundane data. So why aren't we all lifelogging? And there's lots of people who are trying to get us to do this, right? The Facebook timeline is it's kind of a way to be able to kind of capture and make it easy to be able to build these kinds of lifelogs. Path's got their own, Foursquare's got their own. And the real question is, how do we get out of the manual effort, the slog of being able to put all this together? Can it really be automated? And this is the challenge that Kevin and I took on 2 years ago. Could we use a smartphone to build a comprehensive log of where you've gone, what you've done, and to tell stories of why it all mattered? And we put this together in an app that's now available in the market called Saga for Android and iPhone, which does exactly that. But there's a twist. It doesn't require you to have to check in. In fact, we don't care if you look at the app ever. Stick your app, all I would ask of you is download our app, put it in your pocket, and come back 2 weeks from now and check it. we feel that the technology has evolved to the point where we can actually provide an accurate picture of your life. And I'll show you a little bit, talk a little bit in the time remaining about how we actually do that. So your phones are packed with sensors, right? We've got a GPS and Wi-Fi that gives me a rough location. It can maybe get down to the address, but it probably won't get me into the 1927 Event Center. A barometer that tells me whether I'm indoors or outdoors. A microphone can tell me whether I'm at a Starbucks, right? You know, listening to an espresso machine is a great cue to be able to figure that I'm at a coffee shop and not my office next door. Light sensors can build acoustic, light fingerprints to be able to tell me whether I'm under fluorescent lights or LEDs. And accelerometers can tell me whether I'm weightlifting or kayaking or paddleboarding in Green Lake. But that's not all, right? I mean, I'm wearing my Jawbone and my Body Media and my Nike Fuel Band and my Nike shoes. Like I said, I'm a Lifelogger. And this can tell me things like how often I sleep, my activity level, the number of calories I burned, and even my mood, right? Body Media can actually take all this kind of data right now and actually tell me whether I'm happy or not, or how stressed I am, or how pleased I am to really see you all. And that's not even taking into account the class of simulated sensors, right? I argue that something like Angry Birds is a simulated sensor. Why? Because it tells me how bored I am at a current moment, or how stressed I am about, or how much I'm willing to procrastinate. And really, we take all of that data, and in something I'm happy to have conversations about, we put that all together to figure out where you are, what you're doing, and then in the the real bit of genius, you try to start figuring out something about who you are. And the classic example that I talk about is if I track you down to a movie theater at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night, I can make a prediction about how likely you are to have kids at home, or what your childcare status is at home. Right? I have a 2-year-old. There is no way in hell that I'm going to a movie on Tuesday night at 11 o'clock. We use that data not just to kind of build a better experience for you, but to also kind of help refine this and make sure that you can lifelog without actually having to be involved in the loop. And so here's where it gets scary, and here's where the social question becomes even more important. This is actually, I was in Seoul 2 weeks ago, and this is actually a prettied up version of the JSON that we dumped out of the app. This is what my smartphone, this is what your smartphones know about you, or could know about you if you're running Saga. It knows my age, my weight, how much money I make, the fact that I was at the Conrad Seoul where I am, the fact that I was on a business trip, the fact that I haven't worked out in a while, the fact that sleep has been crappy. All of this data is available, and you don't need special hardware to be able to make this all work. So my premise here is if you use something like Saga, or you use the kind of next generation of lifelogging apps that are sure to come out in the next 2-3 quarters, we're taking record off the table. And so the question for you as influencers, the question for you as scientists, the question for you as design mavens is, what does share look like going forward? What is the social model of going forward? We ultimately have, we have this kind of, if we have fulfill the promise of lifelogging, we have a true to life, a perfect mirror that's held up against your life. Sharing that out is disruptive. Sharing that out is powerful. Sharing that out changes the way we have relationships. It's not posting pictures on Instagram. It's talking about our deepest, darkest desires and preferences and interests. And that's what this technology, even though it started very personal, is ultimately going to have its greatest and most lasting effect in terms of how we can interact with one another and what we choose to hold taboo and what we choose to make public. Thanks so much.